So anyhow, very, very happy to have this opportunity. I wish it could be in person, of course, but until things get opened up a little bit, this is the next best thing. So, and I thank my dear sister, uh, Ramakrishna, for the introduction. 1981, when I joined, it was March 5th. So 2 days ago was my 40th anniversary.
Oh, congratulations.
The 40 years of being connected with the order. So it's a very nice occasion. And I like the topic. Actually, this is the topic that the sister chose for me. And I've spoken on it before, that Shiva Ratri is one of my very, very favorite celebrations, the holy days. I've had the opportunity to witness the uh, joy of Shivratri at Bellarmut. I don't know how many times, at least a half a dozen times, and a tremendous experience. So I would like to speak a little bit about Shivratri and the connection with Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother and Swamiji, and also the philosophical significance behind all of it. I'll start with a little chant. Gaurinatham Vishwanatham Sharanyam Purnanandam Devadevam Namami. My salutations to Lord Shiva, consort of the Divine Mother, Lord of the universe, the only refuge, the embodiment of perfect bliss, and the Lord of Lords. This coming Thursday night, we'll be observing this wonderful holiday of Shivaratri, the night of Shiva. It's one of the various occasions where the puja begins when the sun goes down and goes through the entire night. And it's a day of fasting and vigil. And then finally, breaking the fast in the morning with prasad. It has very special meaning. Of course, throughout India, it's observed, but very special meaning for devotees of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother and Swamiji and the Vedanta movement, because of the many beautiful associations that we have with the worship of Shiva, the significance of Shiva, and Shivaratri in particular. We'll get to some of that, going back to when Sri Ramakrishna himself was just a 9-year-old boy. The other special significance is that it's always 3 days before Sri Ramakrishna's birthday. And his birthday is every year the time when we have the final vows given to the monks of the order. So, and there's a long preparatory period. So this period between, actually starting a little bit earlier, but including Shivaratri to Thakur's birthday, is the time when the brahmacharis are kind of living in seclusion and preparing to take their very final vows, which are given the early morning after Sri Ramakrishna's birthday. We don't usually speak about these kind of, you can almost say, sectarian holidays and the worship of deities and everything. And sometimes people will ask us, we're Vedantins, we believe in the impersonal absolute. Why do we have all these different pujas and everything? And the answer is really that sometimes we need these symbols and we need these allegories, and they make the intangible things easier to grasp. It's easier for meditation. It's easier sometimes to make use of symbols and allegories in order to understand some very subtle types of truths. And the other thing is that it is possible, Shiva represents the impersonal absolute reality. It is possible to have a concept and an image of the impersonal absolute reality, which gives scope for love and devotion. And we'll see this with the worship of Shiva, that on the one hand, we'll have our Shivoham, that there'll be those who don't exactly worship Shiva, but they follow the ideal of Shiva, that is oneness. And at the same time, there'll be others who have tremendous devotion to the anthropomorphic symbolism of Shiva and look upon Shiva as their own father, and will go to the temples and offer worship the way it'll be done to any of the more personal or dualistic aspects of God. So I'll cover different areas this morning: the special worship of Shiva, the absolute in all the different forms, then some of the significance of even the mythology and the iconography. Why is Shiva pictured the way he is, with his matted locks and with smeared with ashes and all of the different elements? They all have a very interesting symbolic meaning. And then the importance of the ideal of Shiva in the lives of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother and Swamiji. As I said, I had the wonderful opportunity to be in India at Bellermat for the observance of Shiva Ratri. It's changed throughout the years. I don't know how many of you have been there, but the singing and dancing inside the temple was so tremendous that it actually caused a little crack in the foundation of the temple. And the very early days, I guess the first time I saw it was probably 1978 at that time. The way the worship is done, there'll be some formal worship inside the temple, and the pujaris will be there doing the offerings and reciting the mantras and everything. And at the same time, outside in the big courtyard, there'll be a big dhuni fire, big sacrificial fire, and there'll be, they choose 3 brahmacharis from training center every year. Usually Shiva will be big and strong, and those who have great stamina, who can sit for long hours in meditation without moving. It's a great honor and privilege to be chosen. And then there's 2 attendants there, so there'll be 3 of them. While the worship is going on in the temple, that the 3 Shiva and his 2 attendants, dressed with the long matted locks and smeared with ashes and with the trident, dressed exactly like Shiva and his attendants, they'll be seated motionless, without moving. There'll be mosquitoes coming and everything, but they're fantastic. They must get into some high spiritual state without moving. They'll be sitting around the dhuni, and half the monks are inside the temple and half of them are outside. In the beginning, devotees are there also. And there'll be all songs being sung to Shiva. The atmosphere is just tremendous. And there are 4 different worship periods. At the end of each one, there'll be different types of offerings, different food offerings and everything. But at the end of each worship, Shiva will slowly get up from his meditation and start dancing around the dhuni fire, and very slowly go into the temple. And all of his attendants will follow, all of the monks will follow, and there'll be tremendous singing and songs that Swamiji himself composed. All of this hara hara bum bum stuff. And they'll be going back and forth. The monks will be back and forth with the trident and this tremendous dance. And it's just really, it's so thrilling that if you've ever seen it once, you'll never forget it. So when I made a point that whenever I went back to India, if possible, I would try to go at that time of year, partly because of the Shiva Ratri, partly because of Thakur's birthday, and also to observe the sannyas initiation that's done. All 3 of them are together. So I look at this as kind of a whole combination, as a say 4-day-long celebration. Now, the mythology of Shiva, we know, of course, this idea of Trimurti, that we have Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and Brahma is the creator, and Vishnu is the preserver, who also manifests as the avatar, and Shiva is the destroyer. This is something that has some importance in we can say the mythology of Hinduism, but the devotees of each look upon devotees of Narayana or Vishnu. For them, it's not one among 3. And the same devotees of Shiva. Shiva will be the creator, preserver, and destroyer all in one. He's the Deva, the God of gods. They'll all look upon whoever they worship as the ultimate absolute personal God, impersonal reality, however we look at it. But there are different associations that Sri Ramakrishna speaks about it very much, about those worshippers of Vishnu and the worshippers of Shiva. Brahma gets forgotten. that if we look at this idea of creation and preservation and destruction, Brahma, he's done his job. Nobody cares for him. There's some stories that he was cursed. He would never be worshipped. I think there's only one temple in all of India to Brahma. But anyhow, he kind of falls to the side because he won't do too much. His job is over. So there'll be those who are worshippers of Vishnu, the worshipper of Shiva. Of course, Shiva, that'll bring in the Divine Mother a little bit. And there'll be other things. But in general, Thakur talks about those who have an element of Vishnu and an element of Shiva, those who practice Vishnu yoga, Shiva yoga, and it'll be mostly this distinction between dualistic type of attitude, where we feel some separation and some longing to worship God, and this non-dualistic attitude where we like to feel this oneness with the absolute reality. So this is generally associated with Shiva, although, as I say, there can be many who also have a very devotional attitude towards Shiva. Two things I remember. One, I went in pilgrimage to Kedarnath. Kedarnath is way up in the Himalayas, and this is for this is a form of Shiva. And I remember seeing so many pilgrims, even very elderly people, walking with such devotion, the whole time chanting, Jai Baba Kedarnath, Jai Baba Kedarnath. This really looking upon him in the most personal terms as their very own father. The other thing, I spent a year in India as a student, and I lived in a house. I rented some rooms from a family. Father was a devotee of Kali, and the mother was a devotee of Shiva. She was always talking about Baba. He was always talking about Ma. Everything was Baba, always going to the Shiva temple, bowing down, the tremendous devotion. But at the same time, there's always this underlying idea of oneness, which we don't find, at least to that extent, in the worship of different forms of Vishnu, which is mostly the avatars. It's mostly the worship of Rama and Krishna. So this ideal of Shiva is very often with this Shivoham. We can assert our oneness with Shiva as the infinite absolute reality. We won't assert our oneness with any aspect of God that is an object of worship. The devotees of the Divine Mother, they're half and half. They like to have this little distinction, but they can also say Saham, I am she. It's not very often done. Thakur says it can be done, but they don't like to do it. The distinction is one of simply what pleases the devotee. They'd rather taste sugar than become sugar. Now, this worship of Shiva takes place in two different ways. One is really this ideal of the infinite absolute reality. This is with the Shiva Lingam. You've all seen Shiva Lingam. It can be either some type of polished stone, or it can be some natural rock that's worshipped as the lingam. It can be even, we have our Amarnath temple that inside a cave, and the water drops down and it freezes into ice and forms an ice lingam. So we have these different non-anthropomorphic symbols, very symbolic way of worshiping Shiva. And the other, of course, is as we see him in the mythological stories that we read, wandering the cremation ground and sometimes seeing in ecstasy, repeating the name of Rama, sometimes lost in meditation, full of renunciation, half naked, just with a cloth around his body, long matted locks, all of these aspects. So he's worshipped both ways. The Shiva Lingam is very interesting because there's some deep philosophical meaning behind it. And it represents the infinite, absolute, transcendent reality, but at the same time, this male principle. So a Shiva Lingam will be on a yoni, which is the female principle. And this is something we find in the Shakta tradition, that we have to have both together, very similar to the Sankhya tradition, where we have Purusha, which is the male, and Prakriti, which is the female. And they have to go together. That our understanding of reality is incomplete, according to their doctrine, unless we take both of them together. They'll be separate, but yet dependent upon, codependent, or we can say prakriti dependent on Purusha. Purusha will be the actionless element, pure consciousness. Prakriti will be that principle of nature. So it's almost like Mother Nature and Father Time. We have that expression we use in English. And in the Shakta tradition, more than in Sankhya, they're united. They have to go together. This is why we'll see Mother Kali standing on the chest of Shiva. This is why we'll have the images, this Nara Narishwara. These are very interesting. We'll see statues and images that half of the body is male, half of the body is female, showing that they have to go together. There's a type of nyaya. Nyayas are these different analogies. It's called Andha Pangu Nyaya. That means that it's comparable to one person who is blind and one person who is lame. And they're two friends, they meet each other and they want to go to somebody's house. And the lame person says, I know where it is and I can see where it is, but I can't walk there. And the blind person says, I can't see where it is, I don't know where it is, but I can walk. So what they do is the lame person gets on the shoulders of the blind person, and the person who can see directs the one who can't see but who can walk, and together they can get to their destination. So this is the way they explain this relationship between Shiva and Shakti. Shiva and Shakti. So this lingam represents that infinite absolute reality, but it's actionless. We can't explain creation or anything through it alone. We have to have the Shakti aspect. This is why Sri Ramakrishna is always talking about that we can't think of one without the other. We can't have fire without the power to burn. We can't have Shiva without Shakti. So this is that similar to the Sankhya idea. And it's always thought of in terms of male and female because the child comes from the very body of the mother, the very stuff, so Prakriti will even be composed of the three gunas. It'll be the same material existence that is responsible, and yet the father has to be there. His role is less significant, but he has to be there. So Gita, we have the seed-giving father. We have this type of expression. Then part of this concept of Shiva worship has to do with Kundalini. Again, this combined the worship of the Divine Mother and Shiva. Kundalini will be mother dwelling within the Muladhara generally, but able to rise higher and higher through all the different chakras until she will become one with Shiva in the Sahasrara, the 1,000-petaled lotus at the top of the head. Now, when we get to the anthropomorphic form of Shiva, and this is something that Swamiji says is just typical of every culture. They like to think of God and picture God according to their own understanding. So if we want to think of God as a person, there'll be some personal aspects to it. He says if a water buffalo worships God, it'll worship God as a huge water buffalo. So we also like to picture the aspect of God which we want to worship as a personal God in human terms, and to see the human form and everything. So we have this ideal of Shiva, who is like a person, who lives in Kailash and wanders in the cremation ground and sits for meditation so long that his hair grows very long and snakes will crawl over his body. He won't be aware of it. They won't be aware of him. His body is smeared with ashes, so it's snow white. And we have all of these different elements of it. We've all seen pictures of Shiva. They're very beautiful that way. Now, I'm mentioning all of this because I had a very interesting aha moment. You know, sometimes we get these moments when we say, now I understand something. So I had one of those epiphanies, the kind of, it's not a spiritual experience, nothing like that. But it was one of those things that, now I understand. I was, again, this pilgrimage to Kedarnath. And on the way, there are different pilgrimage places, these prayags, places where there's confluence of the river that's coming down from the Himalayas. One is called Rudra Prayag. And I remember we got there, it was a little bit late at night, it was dark, and there was load shedding. It was very hard to find a way. You have to climb down to get to the river itself, I think 7 long flights of stairs. And when we got down there, I was with actually 2 of the monks of the order. When we got down finally to the river, and I looked up, and I saw that just by chance, the crescent moon, it was maybe the second or third day of the bright fortnight. So the moon, it was just a tiny little crescent moon, and it was just by chance at the exact height where it was touching the snow peak. So you could see the snow peak in the distance, and with the whole top portion of is snow white, and you can see that Ganges or whatever holy rivers are flowing down, and you can see all of the elements that are the picture of Shiva. That it dawned on me at that moment that this is what the rishis must have understood, looking at the Himalayas, seeing the crescent moon at the very top, seeing the Ganges flowing down, that this is Shiva, that Shiva himself is the Himalayas, that and this is the concept we have of Virat, that infinite absolute reality will manifest itself in many different ways. And one of the ways is as this universe itself. So Shiva is not simply the transcendent reality, but this anthropomorphic picture. Really, I really felt like I was looking at Shiva. That because he's pictured with the crescent moon on his head. Why? That you could see because exactly. And why white ash? Because of the snow. So it's very, very fascinating for me to have this this experience, to see it like that. Now, Thakur also talks about this idea of Virat. We have 2 interesting terms, Swarat and Virat. Swarat will be the Shiva dwelling within his own glory, untouched by anything, infinite, transcendent, absolute reality. Virat, that same reality manifests in all its variety as this visible universe. Sri Ramakrishna, at one point when he was in Dakshineshwar, he used to offer worship to the different Shiva lingams. There are 12 different temples, the small temples with the different forms of different lingams. They all have different names and slightly different. And so he was plucking some flowers and some bell leaves. And this one time he said he was offering bell leaves, and he saw that the entire universe was a manifestation of Shiva. And then after that, he never worshipped Shiva again. Another time he's plucking flowers, and he thinks, plucking flowers to offer to whom? The flowers themselves. This is all the manifestation of the divine. So we don't find Sri Ramakrishna going to the Shiva temple as often as to the other temples, rarely. And he used to say that after that, his worship of Shiva was ended in that type of formal worship, because he saw everything, this whole universe was a manifestation of Shiva. Then other times, of course, he would say a manifestation of the Divine Mother, depending on the mood that he was in. Now, I want to turn a little bit to the life of Swamiji, Swami Vivekananda, because there's so many associations with the Shiva. Many people will actually say that he was an incarnation of Shiva. We don't really have this concept, but meaning embodying all of the elements of Shiva, that we see, that intense renunciation, that wonderful meditative capacity and mood, and all of the elements of Shiva we find in Swamiji himself. His very birth, we can say, is connected also with this worship of Shiva. His parents first had 2 children, one with a son and a daughter, who both died in childbirth. Then the next 3 children were all daughters. Now, every family, Hindu family, of course, but in general, I would say, would like to have someone to carry on the family name, to have a son who can keep the family name going. So Swamiji's mother, Bhuveshwari Devi, she wanted to offer special worship to Shiva for the birth of a son. And there was an aunt who lived in Benares, and they requested her to offer regular worship at this Vireshwara temple. This is one of the many, many Shiva temples. Of course, we know that Vishwanath is the most famous, but there are many, many. There's a Kedarnath temple. There are many Shiva temples in Varanasi, in Benares. So she had her go on a regular basis and prayed that a son would be born. And Swamiji's mother also, every Monday she would fast, a holy day for Shiva, and do special prayers, spend her days in fasting and meditation and japa and everything. And one night she had a dream that Shiva awoke from his sleep and took the form of a male child to be born as her son. So she was convinced that Narendra was born either as Shiva himself or as through a boon granted by Shiva. And when it came time to give a name to the child, who we know as Swami Vivekananda, many people said in the family that he bore a great resemblance to his grandfather. Now, his grandfather, Durgacharan Datta, this was Swamiji's father's father, who left the world to become a wandering monk. In those days, there was a tradition that if after marriage one wanted to become a monk, then one should at least give birth to a son who could look after his wife, look after the mother after he was gone. Otherwise, she may be helpless that way. So this is what he did. As soon as a son was born, then he left home. That son, of course, became Swamiji's father. So everybody said, let's name him Durgacharan, named after his grandfather. But Swamiji's mother was insistent. She said, no, we are going to name him Vireshwar, after this Vireshwar Shiva, where the worship was done in Benares. So he was given that name, and then Billy was his nickname, and then later, of course, it became more common to be called Narendra or Narendranath. During his childhood, Swamiji was very, very mischievous and very uncontrollable. And sometimes his mother would say that there was no way to control him whatsoever. The only thing she could do would be to take a big bucket of cold water and pour it on his head and repeat Shiva, Shiva, Shiva. And somehow that did the trick with him. Whether it was the Shiva part or the cold water, it's hard to say, but this is what she would have to do. And sometimes she would say, I prayed to Shiva for a son, and she gave me one of his demons. So, joking, of course. The relationship between Swamiji and his mother, we know, was something very, very special. So when Swamiji was in the West, sometimes he would be walking along, the devotees would be there, and they would hear him say, Shiva, Shiva, Shiva. And they would say, Swamiji, why do you keep doing that? And then he would tell them the story about how his mother would do that. When Swamiji was a young boy, he used to like to play at worship. This was very common in those days. They didn't have video games and other things to do, so they would make little images, or they'd be given little images, and they would do pretend worship and pretend meditation. Of course, Swamiji's pretend meditation was a real meditation. But in any event, he was very fond of the worship of Rama. So this was his favorite deity. And then one day he found out that Rama was was married to Sita. He said, oh, married. I thought it was a matter of renunciation. Even as a young boy, he liked this idea of renunciation. So he went to his mother crying. Is it true? He was married to Sita. She said, yeah, it's true. He said, well, what can I do? I wanted someone full of renunciation. She said, worship Shiva. And of course, she didn't tell him he was also married. How many different consorts he had. But anyhow, from that time, he also became very fond of this worship of Shiva. And let me see where I am. Now, and this really continued throughout his life. Now we see later during Thakur's lifetime also that they observed the Shivratri, and one time Swamiji dressed up. It's very common to dress up as Shiva on that day. And also a very beautiful description we get from the Bharanagar Mutt, the very first Shivratri. So they love to observe that day. And as I said before, Swamiji composed some very beautiful songs to Lord Shiva, which are sung especially in Balarmat during the Shivratri. So Swamiji and others, they would smear their whole body with ashes, spend the whole night in worship and meditation, and as I say, sing songs throughout the night dedicated to Lord Shiva. Then, of course, Swamiji had that tremendous experience in Amarnath. This Amarnath, this is where he went with some of his Western disciples in Kashmir with the ice lingam. And when he went there, the experience was so tremendous that it really shattered his health. They say that after that, his heart became enlarged. He even had a blood clot in one eye. Probably he couldn't see after that in that one eye. The experience was so tremendous, and he felt that he was given the boon. Amarnath means the Lord of the immortal ones. And there's supposed to be a boon, this Ichamrityu, that one will not die until one wills it oneself. And Swamiji felt that he received that. And many people feel, of course, that he chose the time of his death. Sri Ramakrishna also did the same thing. And of course, we in the West, we like to think that he chose the 4th of July, especially to honor the 4th of July. And the country has adopted second country, you can say. There are two other nice little incidents with regard to Swamiji and Shiva and the way people looked upon Swamiji himself. The first is Sri Ramakrishna, that after Swamiji's father died, then Swamiji was in a very bad state of affairs. People said that he lost faith in God, that he was hanging out with bad company. And sometimes people would come to Sri Ramakrishna and they would complain. They would say, oh, what happened to your Narendra? That now he's become an atheist. He's hanging out with the evil company and everything. And Thakur, he said he would never believe it. This one time he just kept quiet. And then that person left the room. And Thakur said to the others, there used to be a big container of Ganges water that was kept in the corner of the room. He said, go take some water from there and sprinkle on the spot where this person was sitting. They all said, why? They wondered, why was he doing that? And he said, don't you know that Shiva himself was insulted here? Shivananda took place here. We have to purify this place. So Thakur looked upon Swamiji as Shiva. We know Thakur had so many different things that he said about him, that he was one of the 7 sages, that he was one of the 4 initial sages that were born, this Sanat Kumar and Sananda and everything. And he was the sage Anada, so many things, but he also used to say he was Shiva himself, or had that ideal of Shiva. The other thing is a very nice conversation we read about. Somebody was asking, I believe it was Koko Maharaj, probably Koko Maharaj, that somebody asked him, tell us about some of the great sadhus that you've seen, some of the most impressive sadhus you've ever seen. So he said, yes, I'll tell you once that I saw this Trailanga Swami in Benares. And he started saying how great spiritual stature he had and everything. Then somebody said to him, well, what about Swamiji? And then he laughed. He said, oh, Swamiji, you're talking about Shiva himself. We won't compare him to any other sadhu. And we hear this so often, that Swamiji was not considered in the same category with anybody else, that many of them really looked upon him as Shiva himself. The other beautiful association, for me at least, is Swamiji when he went to Parameshwaram. When Swamiji came back from his first trip to the West, he first landed in Sri Lanka, Colombo, but the first place he landed in India, the first place he went to was Rameshwaram. And of course, a very, very famous Shiva temple there. This is probably maybe Vishwanath and Rameshwaram, two most famous Shiva temples. And Swamiji gave a very beautiful address. They gave him an address first, a welcoming address, and then his reply. And this is where he talked about that Shiva Jnani Jiva Seva, this idea that the highest worship of Shiva is serving Shiva dwelling within all beings. It's a very beautiful address. He says the worship of Shiva in the lingam is something secondary. Now, I don't know how many of you have been to Rameshwaram, but when you go through the main gate, Swamiji's speech that he gave is engraved on both sides of the door. And to me, I thought how tremendous it is that they're putting on the gate to the temple, Swamiji's words would say that worship of the Shiva Lingam is secondary. Almost unimaginable, because everyone is going there to worship the Shiva Lingam. But he says the real worship is Shiva dwelling within all beings. So now we have Shiva as the infinite transcendent reality. Shiva is manifest as the whole universe. Shiva is dwelling within all beings as the real self. And of course, as my own self, Shivoham. So all of these different ways of this worship of Shiva. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, when we go to the life of Sri Ramakrishna, he was also influenced very much by the Shaiva tradition. We don't hear too much about it, and we don't think about it too much, because first of all, he's born in a Vaishnava family. Now, in Bengal, probably most of the Vaishnava families were worshippers of Krishna, but they were worshippers of Rama. Raghuveer was the family deity. But the worshippers of Rama have this close connection with Shiva and with the Divine Mother also. So it's not at all uncommon. It may be a little bit uncommon for worshippers of Krishna to also worship Shiva, but the worshippers of Rama is not uncommon at all. And because Rama and Shiva, there's that connection there. And Thakur's father, he went on foot. He went a long pilgrimage all the way to Rameshwaram and brought back a Shiva Lingam, which was worshipped there as one of their regular deities in their family shrine. So when there's one family shrine, we have this, there was a Shalagram, which was an emblem of Vishnu. There was the Shiva Lingam, emblem of Shiva, and there was pitcher of water, which is an emblem of Shitala, which is a form of the Divine Mother. So it was really a very liberal way of worship that took place within the family. So there was this tremendous devotion to Shiva through Sri Ramakrishna's father and with the worship of the Shiva Lingam there. There was also a Shiva temple just outside of the compound where Sri Ramakrishna lived. It was called the Jugi Shiva temple. The Jugis, this is a caste of weavers, and that they used to worship there. But Sri Ramakrishna's mother was very devoted to Shiva worship also. And we know that she had some experience there, that she was standing before the temple one day and light came out. She felt that it entered into her and that a child would be born. And so she also felt that Thakur was born through the grace of Shiva. The Shiva himself had manifested inside of her body. And when he was born, again, he was given a name of Shiva, Shambhu, this Shambhu Chandra. Now, probably it was because of the horoscope also, but it's interesting to me that he also had a name of Shiva when he was born. Later, of course, he was called Goladhar, and at some point, Ramakrishna, we don't know exactly when. His brother was Ramkumar and Rameshwar, so probably he was also given the name Ramakrishna. Now, when Thakur was a boy, we know that his first experience of some ecstatic state was simply when he was walking through a field with some of the devotees from his village going to the Vishalakshi temple, and he saw this dark rain cloud come and these beautiful white cranes flew in front of it, and just the beauty of that threw him into an ecstatic state, and he fell down unconscious. But the first real type of samadhi we can say that he experienced through worship of some type of deity. It was on Shivratri night. So this is another reason why it's so such significant to all of us. He was 9 years old. Now, all of these different holy days that take place in India, they go through the night. They have to do something to keep people awake. It's not enough that they'll just be it's worship and everything. So there'll be some performances that are done. There may be some music that's played, some shanai and other things, and very often there'll be what's called a jatra. There'll be these actors that will come and they'll reenact some of the Puranic stories with regard to Shiva on that night. So there was a performance that was to be staged, and the actor who was supposed to play the part of Shiva, something happened. He fell ill. Whatever the reason was, he couldn't do it. So everyone thought, how can you have a jatra play without the main character? Now, they all knew that Godai, Sri Ramakrishna, he was only 9 years old, but they knew he had a special knack for memorizing lines from these different jatras, these different plays, and acting in them, because he used to play hooky from school and take some of his friends, and they would go to this mango grove, and he had all of the lines for every part memorized. He would teach them to the other kids, and he would also play one role, and they would put on these little performances. So he was an expert at that. They all knew that. So they went to him and they say, Godai, you have to do this, otherwise it'll be ruined, the whole performance. You have to play the role of Shiva. So he agreed, and as they're dressing him, they put a wig on with the long matted locks and smear his head and put the skin on his body and give him a trident. They see slowly he's going into a bit of a mood. And when the play starts and he walks out and he stands there in a state of ecstasy, they all thought, we picked the right person. What a tremendous acting job he's doing. Then they realized he wasn't acting, that he really was in a state of ecstasy, and they couldn't get him out of it. And half the people thought, how tremendous. Half the people thought, what's happening? He's ruined the whole performance. Now, this state, we read, lasted 3 days. Not that he was immovable in Nirvikalpa Samadhi for 3 days, not like that, but he was in this mood for 3 days. Now, what's the significance of 3 days? It was very common for him when later we see when he would have some type of realization, some experience of the divine, it would last for 3 days. That mood would last for 3 days. In this case, the 3 days would go right up to his birthday. So this is why I always connect this Shivratri and Thakur's birthday. It's kind of a 3-day long celebration. We find that in his later life, when he took up all different types of sadhanas, that he did not do any Shaiva sadhana. We very often say he practiced all of the different spiritual traditions known to him of the day. But in a sense, we can say formally, no Shaiva teacher came to him. He didn't receive mantra or anything. My feeling is that it was completed with this Shivratri night when he was 9 years old. That he had that realization. There was no need for anything else after that. Another nice incident after Thakur came to Dakshineshwar. In the beginning, he would go to the Shiva temple and do offering and everything. There's a beautiful hymn called Shiva Mahimna Stotram, and it's always recited on Shivratri night. And Thakur loved this hymn, so he was reciting it or chanting it or something. And there's one very special line that's the most famous of all of them. It says, "O Lord Shiva, if the blue mountain were ink and the ocean the ink pot, if the branch of the divine tree were the pen and the earth the writing leaf, and if Saraswati, the goddess of wisdom, were to write with these for all eternity, still there would be no end to your virtues." Then after reciting that, he went into a spiritual mood. He went into some ecstatic state, and he started screaming, crying out, "Oh Shiva, how can I express your greatness?" People didn't know what was happening. They all came running over to him, And he remained in that ecstatic mood for a long time. One reason why Thakur didn't sing so many songs or do so much worship of Shiva is that Shiva represents the infinite absolute reality. And Thakur's main problem was keeping his mind at a lower level. We're trying to go up. He's trying to keep it down a little bit. He used to pray to the Divine Mother, Mother, don't merge my mind in Brahman. I want to enjoy the company of the devotees. There was another occasion when the devotees were there. I don't know if it was worship of Shiva that day, but they were singing many songs about Shiva. And he went into a very deep state of samadhi. So deep that it was very difficult to bring his mind down from that state. He used to tell them, he would tell the devotees that if you see me going into some mood like that, that you try to see what triggered it. If it's a song to the Divine Mother, then you recite Ma, Ma, Ma in my ear, and you can bring the mind down a little bit. So generally they could do that. But this time, even repeating Shiva for a long time, his mind was so deeply immersed in that state. I don't think they even repeated it at that time, but they tried to bring his mind down. Then afterwards he said, you see, if the song is sung to Shiva like that, then you have to repeat that, Shiva, Shiva, try to bring my mind down. So this ideal of Shiva really represented this infinite absolute reality. We can also say that Sri Ramakrishna is near his Vedanta sadhana with Totapuri. If we like, we can consider that also a type of Shiva sadhana, because it's the same Soham idea. Then, of course, we have Thakur's pilgrimage with Mathur Babu to Benares, which is really the city of Shiva, the holy city of Shiva. And he had so many different visions and experiences there. When he first got there, he really felt that it was a city of gold, that it wasn't simply earth. This is one of the traditions that we read, the Kashi Luminous, that it's the city of gold. And he believed it so much and felt it so much that to answer the calls of nature, they had to take him by boat to the other side of the Ganga. Of course, his mood lessened a little bit. And then he had a tremendous experience of how anyone who dies in Kashi gets liberation. And they were going by boat, they're passing the Manikarnika Ghat. This is where, from time immemorial, that bodies have been burnt there without a break. They say there's not a second of the day after day, year after year, when there's not a body being burnt, because there's several different areas where they can do that. And he had a vision that before the person dies, that on one side he saw a very tall man with long matted locks, very fair complexion. This like Shiva whispering the mantra of the Supreme Brahman in his ear. On the other side was the Divine Mother untying the knots. So this was that vision that he had there. So Thakur, as I say, had this tremendous love for this ideal of Shiva. When we get to Holy Mother and Sri Ramakrishna together, we find another interesting aspect of the Shiva Leela, that in a very real sense, they reenacted the play of Shiva and his consort, Gauri or Uma, there's so many different names, and with the Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. Because when Uma, Gauri Parvati, was given in marriage to Shiva, everybody said, oh, you poor girl, you've been married to a madman. He only cares for roaming in the cremation ground. He goes around half naked, singing and dancing and in samadhi and all of that. You've been given in marriage to a madman. This was also part of that ideal of Shiva. And the very same thing happened with little Sharada Devi. Little Sharu, everyone pitied her. They said, you poor girl, you've been married to a madman. That he's in Dakshineswar, and people say he rolls around the ground, that sometimes he doesn't wear his cloth even. They only go around saying, Ma, 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 mother, mother, mother. He can't perform his duties in the temple, that he'll never be a real husband for you. That look at your plight. They pitied her or made fun of her sometimes. Later, of course, when she went to him, she found that he treated her with such love and respect and everything, and that she was so much reassured. But she suffered very much before that when people talked about that. Now, there was a very nice incident one day. This was in Jaidambati, and I don't know if it was Jaidambati. I think it was. Anyhow, the Holy Mother's mother was also present, and a wandering beggar came. And the tradition was then, probably today still, if a beggar comes to beg for food, either at the very least they'll repeat the name of God, or if they can sing, they'll sing some song, some devotional song, and then they ask for some food or some money or something like that. So this one beggar came, and he sang a song which was meant to be the words of the mother of Uma, or Parvati Durga. It says, "Oh Uma, my darling, what good tidings I hear. People say you are adored in Benares as Annapurna. Is it true? Oh Gaudi, when I married you to Shiva, you went as a beggar from door to door for a morsel of food. But today, how glad I am to hear you are now queen of the world, seated by his side. And they called my naked Shiva a madman. How much abuse I had to bear with from everyone. Now I hear that doorkeepers guard his palace, and gods like Indra, Chandra, and Yama hardly can see him. Shiva used to live in the Himalayas. Many a day he got his food by begging. Now he rules over Benares and is rich as King Kubera, the god of wealth." And they liked it so much, they asked him to sing the song again. And then Holy Mother's mother was very much touched by the song. And she said, "Yes, it is true. In those days, everyone regarded my son-in-law, Ramakrishna, as insane and felt pity for my poor Sharada. People said many harsh words, and I almost died of grief. But see how Ramakrishna and Sharada are worshipped as if they were God and Goddess." And then we know, of course, when the Holy Mother went to Rameshwaram herself, and how when she worshipped and saw the Shiva Lingam, how she really felt this identification with Sita, and made that tremendous statement, "How does it look, Mother? Ah, just as it was when I made it myself." Huh? She said something like that. So we have all of these beautiful ways of understanding these different connections between Thakurma and Swamiji, and his worship of Shiva, the image of Shiva, and also the beautiful philosophical meaning of Shiva. Okay, so I wanted to stop just a little bit, few minutes early, so that if anybody would like to ask anything or make any comments, we have a little bit of time to do that.
Let me see here.
Anyone? Mataji?
I'm trying to see the screen here.
Okay.
Let me, anybody with a raised hand? No raised hands? Okay. No raised hands, brother.
Okay. All right. So that means that I answered all of your questions, or it wasn't very interesting. And one or the other. Anyhow, let me close with a chant. And again, these are very nice things to think about as we're approaching Shivaratri. All of the associations with our order, with Thakurma and Swamiji and their lives, and the deep philosophical significance as well. Ajam Shashvatam Karanam Karananam Shivam Kevalam Bhasakam Bhasakanam Turiyam Tamahparam Adyantahinam Pravadye Param Pavanam Dvaitahinam. I take refuge in him, the unborn, eternal cause of all causes, the absolute, beyond all darkness, the auspicious one, self-existent light of lights, without beginning or end. I take refuge in Shiva, the supreme purifier, the one without a second. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace. Peace be unto all. I hope all of you are well. I hope that you didn't suffer too much with the terrible weather we had, and now and with the pandemic and everything. And pray to Takrama Swamiji and Shiva that we all get through all of this and that everyone remains well. Thank you.
So friends, let us end with a guided meditation on unity. This meditation was given by Swami Ashokananda, who once said that even if you do not believe in God, you can meditate on unity. So let's close our eyes, sit straight in our chair, take in 3 deep breaths. Feel your body as a field of vibration. From head to toe, feel yourself as a field of vibration. If we focus on a place on our back, we feel a point of vibration. If we feel our hands touching, that is another point of vibration. When we sit quietly, we intuit unity. Unity pervading all. There is unity behind all our perceptions. Try to feel the unity as the background of all perceptions. In the midst of all thoughts and perceptions, there is unity behind, pervading all. Feel your body. Feel the room around. Feel the world beyond this room. Feel the perceptible unity pervading everything you experience. Everything is a vibration or wave in the ocean of unity. The body's presence is a vibratory presence in the ocean of unity. Be aware of the body as a floating vibration in the ocean of unity that anchors you to this meditation in the here and now. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace.